Well, hello and welcome to our Energy Politics moment. This is actually the second. Last week I interviewed Chris Eyre, one of the two co-hosts of Global Christian Perspectives, and today I'm interviewing Elgin Hushbeck, also a co-host, as we're working out details of our relaunch of that program. It's not dead, it's just being worked on. So we're going to talk a little bit about politics tonight and to some extent politics from a Christian perspective. I'm talking with Elgin, and before I hit him with his first question, he's the author of two books, political category books with Energy Publications. His, shall we say, magnum opus here, Preserving Democracy. This is the second expanded edition, and it is currently available and covers a good deal of ground and some important principles, some of which we'll talk about tonight. What is wrong with social justice? This is the opposite end of the spectrum for size from our Topical Line Drives series. And that we're probably not talking about the content of that today because we're interested in the U.S. election and connected with that, the rule of law, which happens to tangle this week because after a long time and a lot of speculation and plenty of words fired from all sides, FBI Director Comey came out and recommended not prosecuting Hillary Clinton for the email server issues, which is as far as I'll go characterizing them. So, Elgin, what did you think of the press conference and what the FBI director had to say in brief, and then we can dig into it a bit more?
Well, it was a very strange press conference. There were essentially two parts. In the first part, he went through, went through the evidence and essentially confirmed everything that critics have charged Hillary with. And even then some. He revealed some new information that was actually worse than we had originally thought. And then, sort of disjointedly, he went into the second part and said they weren't recommending prosecution, which the two didn't really line up.
Okay. So what particular, what are the charges? Where would you be going with the particular charges that you think should be, what should she be prosecuted for based on what the director presented?
Well, let me give you a contrast. Petraeus was prosecuted and found guilty, and they're currently trying to remove one of his general stars because he gave unclassified information to his publicist. Based on what I've read, the rumors are, we don't know exactly what he gave her, but based on what I've read from reporters reporting from sources, it was apparently his schedule when he was CIA director, which is classified. So he was prosecuted. Other people have been prosecuted. I've had a security clearance, and in a security clearance, you're instructed very clearly how you are to treat classified material. It was revealed that Hillary, contrary to what she claimed, sent secure email or classified emails, received classified emails, classified at the time they were sent, and on at least some of them, they were even marked classified when she sent them. She allowed these materials to get into the hands of people who did not have security clearances. She turned this over to her lawyers to go through and decide what to eliminate and what not to eliminate. She sent it over to the person who had control over her server, did not have a security clearance. So she clearly violated the law, and Comey said that she did. The puzzling part is he said he wasn't going to prosecute because she did not have intent to harm the country. The law says that intent is irrelevant. So whether she intended to harm the country or not, I don't think there's a person who believes that Petraeus intended to harm the country. So we very clearly have set up a double standard. There's the laws that apply to Hillary Clinton and to most major Democrats, and then there's the laws that apply to everybody else. And I think that's what's driving, which is one of the things that are driving a lot of the anger we see among the base, both on the left and the right, is this idea of privileged elites. Those who are in Washington play by a different set of rules than everybody else.
Okay, so with that recommendation, would you be saying that the FBI director, who has been considered pretty much a straight shooter, has ceased to do so?
It's unclear what he was doing. Like I said, there's a logical disconnect between the first half of the press conference and the second half. It doesn't make sense. He laid out how essentially the first part was an indictment, and then he recommended that she not be indicted. So that's the mystifying part. Why he did it, we don't know. Probably the best speculation, and it is only speculation, is that he was essentially reluctant to put the FBI in the middle of a political campaign, basically recommending that her candidacy should be terminated. So instead, he laid out all the evidence and then stepped back and let the American people decide in the election. Unfortunately, I don't think that's his job. He should do what the law requires him to do. He should have, on the one hand, he should have sent a recommendation, but that should have probably been kept quiet and then let the Attorney General decide. I don't think it would have been quiet for very long, but that was not his job to essentially take the heat. He basically became a shield for the Justice Department, not doing what hasn't been doing throughout the Obama administration, is prosecuting Democrats.
Okay, so you're using this. You're saying this is an example of the elites living according to a different set of laws. So how does this play from here forward in the election? If you're saying, and it's possible that I guess that Comey was saying, let the people decide. And certainly I think it's been thrown to the people because most other possibilities for action, including congressional investigations and so on and so forth, probably the timing isn't there. So the people are going to be deciding. It sounds like we have a Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump general election.
Maybe.
Okay. What's your options on your maybe?
Well, this is not over. For one thing, whether it was deliberate or not, Comey laid out a number of are now known to be facts that completely contradict what Hillary's been saying all along. So one of the other issues, it's not just that she said this in press conferences and that she lied throughout this entire episode, but she also said it under oath before Congress. And so one of the things that's going to happen is people are going to go over her congressional testimony, and they're going to point out where she said things like she only had one server, or she only used one device, or she never sent email that was marked classified. And she didn't delete, she only deleted emails that were personal in nature. All those statements are now known to be false and have been demonstrated to be false by the FBI. So that raises the question of, again, if anybody else did that before Congress, they would be prosecuted. There's a law that says it's illegal to lie to a government official performing their duty. Scooter Libby was never convicted for the Valerie Plame episode. What he was convicted for was lying to the FBI in basically a three-way he said, she said. His story didn't line up with Tim Russell's. It didn't line up with another reporter's. All three stories didn't line up. He got convicted, and he was shown not to be the person that leaked the information. So if he's getting convicted on something like that as a high government official, then how does Hillary get to go before Congress and say lie after lie after lie after lie, and yet again, is she above the law? Is she free to do whatever she wants because the law just does not apply to her? So I think there's some still questions that are going to have to be resolved. There's also the fallout of a number of other people who have convictions pending, or have been convicted of similar acts, or have pending trials coming up. They're immediately looking over this as a precedent to go over and overturn previous trials. So there's a lot of turmoil that's going to flow out of this.
I'm not doubting the turmoil. I'm not doubting the turmoil. I'm simply doubting that enough happens prior to the Democratic convention and even prior to the election to change much at this point.
Very true.
Following the lines, there is a very sharp partisan divide on how this is being read. And, you know, I'm not trying to tell you how I feel about the line. I'm just simply saying that I wonder if there is enough time that, in other words, the choice in November is very likely to be Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump.
That I would agree with.
Simply due to time. Now, yes, there may be, you know, we may be arguing about this for another 3 or 4 years down the road. That would be unsurprising. Other cases that you're talking about are even older than that, and still not completely resolved. So, you know, the wheels move slowly. And
yes,
so, you know, and all of that was to bring us right back to the real question of the election, which is really where I'd like to conclude the conversation. We're looking at Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. How do you feel about that? And is there anything on the other side that you still think is viable that might make Trump not be the Republican nominee?
There's a small possibility on that. What is going to next Thursday is the rules convention, where they will set the rules that happen at the convention. This happens every 4 years. It's almost inevitably a completely dull and uninteresting event. This time it's likely to be at least a little more interesting, and probably very interesting. I'm not an expert on the rules, but from what reporting I've heard today, it takes 28 votes within the Rules Committee to move something to the floor of the convention. There are currently 20 solid votes to change the rules to unbind the delegates. There are 30 some odd uncommitted people, and then there's the supporters of Trump who don't want to change the rules. Actually, it's not changing the rules; it's making forming up what the rules will be, but they usually go from the last 4 years. According to one report, 7 more people have agreed to overturn or to reset the rules, but they don't want to go public for somewhat obvious reasons, that's true. Out of the remaining 22 people, one more person would have to step up and say, we'll change the rules. Is that likely? Who knows? Reporters that I have been following on that say it's gone from what a week ago they would have said less than 10%. It's now gone up to 40%. And as Donald Trump continues to mismanage his campaign and stick his foot in his mouth all the time, the chances of getting a few more people to unbind the delegates gets higher. I would probably agree it's less than 50%. Maybe 40% is optimistic, but I don't think it's solidly a done deal that he will be the nominee. So at least maybe I'm just eternally hopeful.
Since you obviously you obviously don't like either choice. One last question about that, and then we'll make this a conclusion, because that's about as much of a conclusion as we can come to with the evidence we have. If the delegates were successful in say dumping Donald Trump and nominating somebody else, what do you think that would do to Republican support? Because we do have a fairly large number of people who have voted for Donald Trump.
I think it would depend very, very much on the dynamics of how it happened, and very, very much on who they put in place. Now, if they were to dump Donald Trump and put Romney or Jeb Bush in charge, that would be a disaster in my view. If they were, I mean, my personal preference would be that they would put Cruz in, but I'm not sure I would want to have that preference in this situation. So they would have to seek some sort of conciliatory candidate, somebody who could reach out to both sides. Probably the best person in that light would be Marco Rubio. But it would depend very much on the dynamics of how it happened, and then more importantly, what Rubio's response would be. And Donald Trump would be furious, and there'll be a whole set of people that they would go and sit out the election. On the other hand, there's a whole set of people that are going to sit out the election because they just will not vote for Donald Trump, and they will not vote for Hillary. My view of the election is you have two people that are completely unelectable running against each other. And I can come up with scenarios where either side wins, because I don't think either in a normal year neither of these candidates could win. It's only the unique circumstances of this particular year that have allowed them to get the nomination.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what actually happens. I tend to be, how shall I say, to think it will be less exciting than you do right at this point. But it's going to be interesting to see what'll be going on. Let me just remind everybody, I've been talking with Elgin Hushbeck Jr., who's one of our Energion authors. His books, What is Wrong with Social Justice? This is a short read, about 44 pages from our Topical Line Drive series. Definitely worth your time. And Preserving Democracy, which gives a more lengthy exposition. I think if you would want to know why, I would say that Elgin Hushbeck is definitely a conservative, and definitely a conservative who would not warm up to Donald Trump. Reading that Preserving Democracy would probably answer that. So with that, thank you for joining us, and look for another posting on politics, an Energion Politics Moment next Saturday.